And then I'm going to use my damp brush to soften and pull some of that color up. Welcome to World Watercolor Month on the Angela Fair Watercolor channel. I'm excited to be a part of this worldwide celebration of watercolor again this year. There's a lot you can do to celebrate World Watercolor Month with us. First of all, watch this video. I'm going to be doing a painting demonstration, sharing a little bit of my very direct and quick watercolor painting practice. I love being able to make a painting in half an hour or less, and I'm going to show you how I do that today. Additionally, if you want to be a supporter of World Watercolor Month, spread the news, spread the joy, let people know that they can get involved. Visit the website worldwatercolormonth.com. There you will find links to the shop where we have products. My World Watercolor, I sent in a painting earlier this year, and it's a mug. It's also a pouch that you can keep your watercolor supplies in. I love that everything I need for watercolor can fit in a pouch like this. And the proceeds from all of the items in the World Watercolor Month shop all go to the International Child Art Foundation. So you're supporting a great charitable cause, empowering kids to make art, which is dear to my heart. That's how I grew up. Just having art supplies at my fingertips so that I could paint whenever I wanted to. Other ways you can be involved in World Watercolor Month: paint along with us. Whether you want to participate with the optional prompts, which you can find on the World Watercolor Month site, or do your own thing. When you paint this month and share your work on social media, use the hashtag World Watercolor Month to be added to the movement. Basically what happens is, if you're not familiar with hashtags, when you see that hashtag on social media, you can tap on it, and that link will take you to other posts and content that have included that World Watercolor Month hashtag. So you can see what everybody else is doing, and they can see what you're up to too. The other thing I do, and this is just a personal thing, but July, World Watercolor Month, is a great time to be looking at your practice and seeing how you can use your art habit to support others. One way I do that is July is a good time for me to do a studio declutter. I get given a lot of free samples of products to try. I buy a lot of stuff that I don't end up using or loving. And I love going through my studio at this time of year and putting together a box of materials to donate. As in your community, you can probably find a great place that would love to have some art supplies for a children's program. Anyone involved in children's education is always looking for art supplies. The Girl Guides or Girl Scouts is another option. I've donated to my local library and to women's shelters as well. Just looking for places that art is so healing. Making supplies available to children is a really good way of just kind of spreading the love and supporting others. Another thing I would suggest you do, and this is not related to World Watercolor Month at all, but I really believe in community building, invite a friend to come and paint with you this month. Make it a time where you build your relationships with other artists and see World Watercolor Month infect, contage, whatever you want to call it, impact your community, whether it's online or in person. And now I need to go and practice what I preach. So today I wanted to do a painting inspired by the World Watercolor Month prompts. I actually got to write and decide what the prompts would be this month, and that was a lot of fun. I like to have fun with these prompts and not just take the most literal option that you see when you look at a prompt. And today's prompt is striped, which sounds like a very literal thing to think about. So I have no idea where I'm going to take this. The prompts are completely optional, but if you are going to use them, it might feel like they're a little bit limiting at first. And so what I want to just encourage you with is give yourself time to kind of settle in and think about the prompts a little deeper than what's obvious. As artists, we get to be poets. We don't have to be so literal. And it's really fun to kind of follow that trail of thought and see just what kind of rabbit trails it takes you off onto. So my prompt today is striped. And I'm trying to think about what is striped? What's something striped that I could paint? And as I was thinking about stripes, I actually thought about my favorite suitcase, which went on its last journey last year when wheel broke off while I was traveling. I had to drag it three-legged through the rest of my trip. And my little black and white striped and polka dot suitcase came with me on a lot of really wonderful art and painting trips. But I have to say that my trip to England and the little side trip we did to Paris was pretty special. I teach these art and travel trips. You know, we pack the suitcase with art supplies and we go see what we can paint in a brand new foreign place. I'm going to use my travel palette as we commemorate my striped suitcase by painting a scene from its very last trip. And that is this view of Paris from the Arc de Triomphe. And I'm going to paint this. I'm going to challenge myself to paint this from this picture on my phone, and I'm going to paint it in 40 minutes or less. That's the goal I'm going to set for myself. Ideally, I want to do it in 30. Just leaning the phone up over in the corner here, and I'll put the reference photo in the link below the description if you want to try this for yourself. What I want to do is paint rapidly. I want to paint this in a few minutes, and so I need to set some parameters for myself to make this a little bit easier. I'm going to sketch with a pencil, and this is new for me in the last couple of years. We're going to put in a rough horizon over here. My paper is not as long and narrow as my phone, and so I'm going to chop a little bit of, we're going to see about chopping off a little bit of the top and bottom to make this work. We've got the Eiffel Tower over here. It's a big stick. In case you've ever seen it, you know that it just pokes out of the ground, something like that. Then we've got buildings and so forth all along here. And then we've got this larger building here, and I'm not sure what any of these are called. We have a line of buildings that comes down along the side here. And then we've got clusters of trees, green space in this area. There's a dark shape here that kind of is perhaps the courtyard inside of the larger kind of mass of buildings here, and it's got a bit of an irregular shape to it. I don't want to paint every building. I don't want to paint detailed Eiffel Tower. I want this to be a sketch and to capture a little bit of the flavor of the scene without me being locked into every detail. The colors that you're seeing in this palette, this is my travel palette. It's extremely versatile, and I've added a couple of extra colors, but the bulk of the colors here, most of them will do just fine. Everything you need for a painting trip anywhere in the world. I've tested it. I can assure you that these are the colors that work really well for me. You get to choose the colors you love. That's the wonderful thing about watercolor. Lots of colors to choose from. But this little palette, if you want to see what I'm using and the exact precise list, I will put a link in the description below the video. They are from Daniel Smith, my Daniel Smith dot card, and a couple of additions. Now the first thing I'm doing, I'm just going to rough in my sky really quickly. We're going to get the whole sky wet, so we can maybe play with some wet and wet effects and just create a beautiful kind of ethereal sky. But I'm also going to pull my sky color down the horizon, because the distant buildings in my reference photo are a hazy kind of blue-gray kind of color, blue-violet maybe. So if I just bring that color right down, I remove the hard edge that I might have where sky and horizon meet. I get a nice soft transition between sky and horizon, and that is pretty accurate to what I'm seeing in my reference photo. Right now with mostly, this is a brush that's not very wet. It wants to put a little bit of color on the paper, not flooding the paper. If I have a really wet brush, I can put a drop of water that will flood the page, and that might make some blooms that would be good for clouds. But then as I add in additional colors, I tend to want to use what I call a neutral brush. So it's a brush that is adding moisture to the paper, but it's adding it in a balanced way. Not a super wet brush that is going to push water into the page, release a lot of pigment, and perhaps create blooms that are happening here and making beautiful cloud effects. But as I add some color, I don't want that to happen. I want it to be a little bit more smooth. And I'm just going to soften a little bit more down here so we have that hazy feel in the distance. And I think it's hazy, but it's also a little bit murky. And I'm going to add some kind of muddy gray violet colors for my distant buildings. Got a little tall building here, maybe another one there. And one thing I think is helpful when you want to paint rapidly like this is we need to think about painting symbolically. So rather than saying, okay, I've got a building over here, we might make a very straight line. Rather it's like, okay, I see dark lines and dots that indicate buildings and windows. So maybe we start putting in some of those dark lines and dots. I see white gleaming bits. And I look for, so I want to leave little white holes. And I look for places where maybe my lines are diagonal. And, you know, am I drawing horizontal and vertical lines, or am I drawing diagonals? So I look for those different aspects as I think about painting my scene. I'm not putting the Eiffel Tower in yet. We're going to save that. This is my very first time painting the Eiffel Tower. And painting in Paris. My 2-day excursion in Paris was at the very end of my trip to England, and it was just a personal little voyage with my daughter. And so the two of us went and explored. We've got more green space over here and a little bit of green over here. So we'll just pull that in. The two of us went and explored. We took care of Paris. Paris took care of us. And then we headed home. Travel is really fascinating because there's nothing like feeling, you know, you get to feeling kind of comfortable painting at home, painting your own familiar places. And for me, that's a lot of trees. So here I am comfortably painting trees down at the bottom. And then I go somewhere new and I have to discover a whole new, perhaps, color palette. I have to understand new shapes. And that's really challenging. But one thing I believe, I always ask myself, what would this be if it were simple? How do I simplify something? Long roof line of this chateau. How do I simplify something? And so it is in essence, everything is in essence in a painting, shapes and colors and values. So how do I take what I'm seeing and see those underlying shapes and simplify it down? So I'm not just going, oh, scary chateau with all those windows and little peaked roofs. How do I now see this like an artist so that I can simplify and paint it directly with some kind of immediacy? And so we're gonna fake it. We're gonna act like we know what we're doing, and try to say, because I can't. The interesting thing is I can't know that I'm doing this perfectly. We don't get to know that. So other artists get to handle this subject in their own ways. I'm looking and I'm seeing this chateau. I'm seeing that long strip of dark windows. And then I'm seeing the roof line, and I'm going to put in a line to describe that roof line. It kind of changes up over in this area. And squint at it always helps to kind of simplify it. When you squint, you kind of remove detail. There's another dark roof that meets over here. And so we're going to place that in, and that's going to give me potentially 2 buildings. And then this building here has a little bit of sun landing on it, so it's got a little bit of a warm color in comparison to the roof line in front of it. And then it kind of comes out, and we see a shape there. And all of that in this area is described or kind of forms itself around a big dark shadow shape. And I'm going to try to take that dark shadow shape and make it not black, because whenever you see something that looks black in your reference photo, remember that when you saw it from life, probably you saw a lot more nuance of color than that. So we want something that's near black, but not black. So I'm going to, we had a roof line, we had this guy, we were going to look for that dark shape, and we're going to describe it approximately. I'm releasing myself from the job of needing to see this in intense and perfect detail. And I felt the need to just say detail in that pronunciation. It's not usually how I say it. Why? Because I'm going to pretend I'm a fancy artist who knows what she's doing. So we're describing a shape that is a little bit of an intimidating shape. We've got this building here has an interesting roof line, and we've got other buildings here that kind of come diagonally. We've got a line that crisscrosses it there. We've got a patch of kind of a green. It could be a garden on a rooftop. I kind of think that's what it is. So we're going to patch that in, and a little garden on a rooftop over here. And in fact, there's probably gardens and rooftops all over the city. So let's put some of those in. And give ourselves some green that moves around the page. And that's kind of how I feel when I'm painting something like this. Masses of buildings, a lot going on. If it's happening in one place in the city, it's probably happening somewhere else. Let's find a way to echo some of the things we're doing elsewhere. So one thing I'm seeing, we've got that dark roof here. Then we've got a building that kind of comes diagonally here. And then we've got an interesting kind of blue, slightly curved roof there. So we're going to exaggerate that shape a little bit. We've got a building over here that could be maybe the same color as some of these colors we're working with here. I'm going to pull that violet up, lavender it actually is. And here's where we start to kind of blur the details. Over here, we know this works. We know we can really make things hazy off in the distance like this. But then when we come to the foreground, we start feeling the need for detail. That's not wrong. That's true. But then where do we stop putting in details and start simplifying and blurring distinctions? And that, I think, is one of the challenging parts of developing a plein air practice, finding a way to simplify and narrate your subject without painting every detail. One thing that's really helpful is getting older, because your eyes stop being able to see tiny things anyhow. And I'm kind of in that place of getting used to having a little less ability to understand those fine details. And maybe that's making it easier for me as a painter. Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm just squinting more. But I don't get to know where the line is between detail and this indistinction. So we kind of have to figure it out. What's kind of working, and we're just guessing. Just do a lot of guessing in watercolor, and that's how it works. Let's put in a line for the base of the Eiffel Tower, another line for that other central kind of area, and a dot for the kind of peak at the top. Today I want to talk about my travel watercolor kit, and this is the most versatile kit that I have. I've traveled all over the world with this beautiful selection of paints from Daniel Smith, and I've been able to paint anywhere using the colors contained here. A few years ago, I was named as a Daniel Smith brand ambassador and had the opportunity to select an Angela Fair watercolor palette. I knew that I was going to be stuck with this palette for a long time, and so I wanted to choose the 18 colors that I thought would be most versatile and also reflect who I am as an artist. It was a big task to take on. Let's just open up my palette and see what it looks like. It's filthy. I just got back from a trip to Greece, and inside of this little 18 well palette, and I'll link it up in the description below the video, I have 18 colors from my Daniel Smith palette. You might expect or not be surprised that I chose a primary set of 3 for the top row of the dot card. I've got carmine, phthalo turquoise, and nicolazo yellow to make a good mixing combination. So you can mix all kinds of colors using those top 3. Interestingly, those are actually the colors that I've used the least in this palette. I rarely touch them because I'm having so much fun with the colors here. I'm also going to address the fact that you do see some extra colors in the center of the palette here. We'll talk about that in a minute. Further into the palette, I went with some secondary colors, Aussie Red Gold, Green Gold, and Cobalt Violet Deep. And actually the entire selection of colors I'll link up as well. They've got them listed on the Daniel Smith website, so you can fill your own palette with these same hues. I've chosen beautiful granulating colors like Hematite Burnt Scarlet Genuine, like Sodalite Genuine, Rose of Ultramarine, Zoisite Genuine, and Moon Glow. All of these colors, when they are permitted to flow across your paper, they create some really beautiful textural effects. You'll see colors separate and get this beautiful complex flow of color. I've got some really vibrant hues. I've got Opera Pink, Cobalt Teal Blue, and Lavender. These are lovely exclamation points of color that I love throwing onto my painting. And recently in Greece, I found myself gravitating toward blues, using a lot of lavender. You can see it's almost empty here. And I actually did choose to bring an additional blue, a cobalt blue, in addition to the verditer blue, which is here in the palette. I think the verditer blue is a favorite of mine because it plays so well here in my home in northern British Columbia. But I have a sweet spot for that cobalt violet or cobalt blue, which has always been a traditional, beautiful blue. When I travel, I top up this palette a few days in advance, and then I know I'm good to go. Whether I'm in Europe or the United States or just in my own backyard, I can choose from 4 or 5 or 6 of these colors from my palette to work with whatever environment I find myself in. I was surprised in Italy when I traveled there in 2021 that I didn't get to use any of the turquoise that I'm so fond of, but found myself moving into these warmer colors of Aussie Red Gold, Venetian Red, and just letting, and the Mars Yellow, which is a beautiful buttery yellow, and letting those dance across my paper instead. And I continue to be surprised as I visit a new country how I can find colors in my palette to interpret, to express that country. Because being locked down to 18 colors is difficult for me. Not that I want to use more than 18 colors in one painting, but I'm always discovering new color. Color is an inspiration for me. And so I like finding new hues, adding them into the palette as I'm obsessed with them. And that's what these little square half pans are for. I can glue them down with a little glue dot and bring them along on my trip so that whatever I'm currently obsessed with gets to come alongside of my traditional palette and maybe liven it up a little bit. The colors here are actually pretty lively. Daniel Smith has such a huge range, well over 200 colors for you to work with. They have their gouache series now as well, and they're always adding to their line of gouache. And they have watercolor sticks, which are also a very portable way of bringing watercolor along with you. If you're traveling with watercolor sticks, plan to pop them into a Ziploc bag so that they don't get damp and smudge all over your luggage. And with travel watercolor kits, one thing I would suggest you to look for is always look for a little rubber gasket that will seal your watercolor kit so that any liquid in here doesn't leak out all over your stuff. Even though this palette's been traveled with me for quite a while, and actually the original latch has snapped off, I just put a piece of masking tape on it and off I go, and I haven't ever had it leak onto my luggage. I've added a couple squares of Velcro, and those just help. I have Velcro on my easel as well, so that when I stick my palette onto the shelf on my easel, it stays put. So that's my Daniel Smith Angela Fair palette. You can take a look at it on the Daniel Smith website and order these wherever you buy your fine watercolor paints. Kind of area. and a dot for the kind of peak at the top. There's a big long leg that comes down here, girders that come this way. And then I'm going to use my damp brush to soften and pull some of that color up. And when you have something like the girders that have actually a lot of transparency, there's a lot of fine lines clustered together. So using some transparency here can actually be a good way of depicting a whole bunch of lines close together, a lot of things going on in one place. And actually, and let's go a little further with our fine lines. I'm going to pull out my little magic wand, my Levinson paintbrush. This is their large goat synthetic blend. And I love it for creating some really interesting lines. So glancing at my reference photo, I see some horizontal lines that look like rooftops. I'm going to place those over in here. I see some darks over here. I'm using Moonglow for this. It's kind of a dark, a lovely murky violet, so it makes a good dark shadow color. And I'm going to just draw some vertical lines and then some horizontal lines. And then with the damp brush, I can soften some of those areas, and that's going to make them indistinct fading into the background, ideally. That's the goal. If it doesn't work, well, you know, there's another piece of paper, I think, in the world that I can use. When I clamp down on my brush like this, that's me trying to be in control. That didn't work. That's a fatter line than I wanted to create, so I'm going to blot it. I do get a do-over. Interestingly, I rarely try to clamp down on my brush to that extent because I often find a kind of fresh, loose line is going to work better than a really controlled line. I knew better and I did it anyhow. Okay, looking at my image of Paris, my reference photo, what are the overall colors in those masses of buildings? I've got a creamy kind of warm yellow, which is works well with Mars green. Let's put some of that warm yellow in for some of our buildings. And you can do that with a long shape, a long wide shape, like this, to be maybe a row of buildings or one long building. You can also do some little verticals. Maybe those are window frames. And you can even use a little bit of spatter. I'm going to bring a little bit of that warm color down the page over to here. I'm going to lift a little bit of that warmth out. It's a little darker than I'd like. Smudge it a little bit. Let some of those colors blend together. There's not really much that's pure white in my reference photo. There's a few places where we see the sun bouncing off different objects. That's going to be a bright color. And over here where my windows are, in this chateau, whatever it is, French architecture, I'm going to try to put a little row of windows here. There's maybe squinting at it, another row of windows underneath. And we're just symbolizing them with vertical lines. And maybe a line going across, maybe a line going across for the roof line here. Right now I just want to adjust my trees and bushes so that less of the building is peeking through, which is accurate to my reference photo. Continuing to use my little Levinson magic wand, and I do have a discount code for these brushes. If you place an order with Levinson paintbrushes during World Watercolor Month, use the code Angela and you'll save a little money on your order. These are handmade brushes, so they are made to order as you order them. So be aware that if you order them tonight, they will not ship the next morning, but give Tracy Levinson time to craft your brush. That also means you can make specific requests. One thing you might ask about is if you have any trouble with arthritis and gripping a skinny brush handle is fatiguing for your hands, you can ask about having a wider brush chosen, a thicker handle, make it easier for you to grip. And there's, different things like that that could be really helpful for you. Additionally, if you don't very often paint larger than the size I'm painting today, which is about 9 by 12, I would encourage you to choose the medium-sized brush and not the large. This is probably the smallest painting I would do with the brush this size. So I already feel like the buildings are coming to life. So we are maybe 20 minutes in here, and already you can see that there's a lot of kind of the feeling of the buildings kind of coming together. At this stage, I'm actually going to pull my pencil out again and play some pencil games. And this is new for me. I said again, but I think this is actually the first time I've pulled my pencil out. You can take a look at my other World Watercolor Month videos for how I work with a pencil in my plein air painting practice, because I do not like to draw in detail. That is not my way. And so you might be intrigued by how you can use a pencil to be a loose and sketchy random painting artist just like me, or maybe even better, because I think finding your own way to do things is an incredibly freeing practice. And that is actually one of the reasons I pull the pencil out at this stage, is because let's put a dark dot of window in there. One of the reasons I pull my pencil out at this stage is because I sometimes start to tense up as I get into the detail phase of the painting process. And bringing my pencil out, especially because I love to hold it with this kind of very childish kind of grip. I hold it in my fist. I draw rudimentary lines. And that is my process for reminding myself that this is my painting. I'm taking ownership of it. I put a building in over here, building in over here. And so doing these rudimentary lines is actually a little nod to my childhood self, which I think is really fun. Saying, you were a little girl who never knew you'd get to be a professional artist, who never knew your art practice would make you be so joyful, who never knew that you were allowed to paint, not because, as I got older, I started thinking I needed to be good enough to be an artist. And that struggle to be good ended up slowing me down for a long time, because I was trying to be good by other people's standards. And so when I pick up this pencil and I make these chunky lines, I hold it in my fist, I do all the things that I thought a professional artist was not allowed to do. And it's a little vote of approval. Oh, see, and I just found the magical way to draw my little chateau roofs, those dormers or whatever they are. We're just going to draw triangles all across the page. That is the best feeling on the planet, to do whatever you want and just let it, own it in your painting. Super fun. Rows of buildings lined up like a heart attack. There we go. Dot, dot, dot windows. TV antennas, we don't know. They get to be in the painting. Really, really fun, really freeing. We're going to go back and try that Eiffel Tower kind of shape again. I want to kind of come down, bring a quick angled stroke, and then maybe a little dot for the top, and then maybe 2 or 3 little horizontals. That should maybe... It's not my favorite Eiffel Tower that I've ever painted. It's the only Eiffel Tower I've ever painted. But that's all right. It's the beginning. And one thing that's happened, I think, being a long-term artist, let's put some angles on our roof line over here. But because I've been painting like this for 30 years, like this, growing, looking for my way to paint my subject, I have started... I realized that one day whether or not this painting turns out. Even if it doesn't turn out, one day I'm going to paint the Eiffel Tower again, and it's going to go better. And I'm going to look at it and say, hey, remember that first time I painted the Eiffel Tower and I didn't like it much? Just refining the shape here. But, you know, I could never paint this Eiffel Tower, whatever it is I'm going to paint in 10 years from now. I could never paint this if I hadn't painted that one first. And that's where the freedom is for me. So let's do some little dabs of lavender back in here to just, maybe we've got some more buildings in different shapes. A little bit of, that's too much, moon glow. One dark mark can really take over a painting. We just soften it. Smash some brushes into the page. Notice how my sky has evolved with those drips of water. If I want to maybe add some more soft fuzzy clouds, I can do that. But mostly I don't like to do too much to my sky after it's dried the first time, especially because we are talking about painting rapidly, direct painting, and painting with in 30 minutes or less. And one reason I like doing a painting like this, whether I'm on site, you know, I could have climbed up the Arc de Triomphe and pulled out my painting stuff and painted on site there. I actually thought about it for a few minutes. What happens when you paint on site is paint a scene, your reference photo in 30 minutes or less. And I'm not liking any of that sky. You know how we're going to solve it? I'm going to soften all those marks I just placed with my spray bottle. Let it go. And with the spray bottle, it will reactivate any paint that hasn't locked in, dried yet. You can see my Eiffel Tower is actually bleeding a bit, but that's all right. Anyhow, when you do these 30-minute or less paintings, they become very powerful for you as an artist because you get to learn how to make faster decisions. And I see a pop of yellow in my scene, so we're going to put a couple of little dabs of yellow in the painting. And do I see any other colors off in the distance that I could play with and bring into my painting? It's actually lots of neutral colors in this painting. But I think what might liven it up is something that I often use when I'm painting, and that is a little bit of turquoise, cobalt teal. We're going to spatter a little bit there. We're going to do a few little stutter marks, little dots of turquoise. Maybe there's a turquoise roof over there. Somebody's got an awning. There's a smudge over there. We can throw a little bit of turquoise even into our trees just to brighten them up and make them look a little bit spring-like. And just have a little bit of fun with bringing in some exclamation points of color, which is a lot of fun in the painting practice. I'm starting to feel like I could quote the book Madeline, like there's maybe an accordion playing in the background. Maybe someone's about to hand me a cafe au lait. And I think a little rain might be falling on the Eiffel Tower right now. Thanks for watching. You know, I'm all about making watercolor more accessible, and painting rapidly with that immediacy, to me it's really powerful. It has given me skills that I wouldn't have had if I'd really taken my time and agonized over every decision that I made. Strengthening your decision-making process is a really good way to become more independent as an artist and just kind of own your own process. So I encourage you to challenge yourself with a time limit on your painting practice. Create a painting and then challenge yourself to paint it again, but faster. See what you can do when you only have 30 minutes. What if you only have 10? What if you only have 5? What if you only had 2 minutes? Those kinds of challenges make your painting practice stronger, and it's amazing what you can get away with when time forces you to simplify. If you found this video helpful, if you like the way I teach and the way I coach artists to own their process and really embrace the way you learn and the way you want to paint, I want to encourage you to join my Heart-Led Artist Journey. This is an online course dedicated to mentoring you as a developing artist. Whether your art practice is realistic or intuitive, or you fall somewhere in between, if you're looking to own your own process, to really lean into who you are as an artist and maybe discover who that is, my Heart-Led Artist Journey is where I model my own practice and process of doing that very thing. And you can find out more about that at heartledartist.com. I also send out weekly emails designed to inspire artists and encourage you wherever you are at in your artistic practice, whatever kind of artistic outlet you choose. And you can sign up for that email list and get those weekly inspiration emails in your inbox by visiting my website at angelafair.com. Thanks for watching. If you created a painting inspired by World Watercolor Month, don't forget to post it on social media using the hashtag World Watercolor Month and the hashtag AngelaFair. I'd love to see what you're up to.